In this video, I'm going to show you how you can draw a pencil crayon sketch of a building. I will be drawing the Union buildings in Pretoria, South Africa. Let's get started. The first thing that we're going to do is just draw a nice straight line down the middle of our page. And this is because sometimes when you're drawing a picture, you get really caught up in your details and then you end up not leaving enough space or leaving too much space and your picture doesn't look balanced. So this line down the middle of the page is just going to help us make sure we're spreading our picture out nicely. Okay? You want to press quite lightly. Don't need a dark line. Now you can keep your ruler handy for this picture if you would like, because buildings have got lots of straight lines, but if you would just like to do it freehand, that's also fine. It's a pencil sketch. I'm a bit lazy, so I'm not going to use my ruler again. The Union buildings, let's just have a quick look at the finished picture so that you know where we're heading. It's got these two towers and then a curved part in the middle, an arched type of shape, and then two buildings that come out the side, and then there's just really long, boring rectangular buildings that go out on each end, and I've kind of cut them off the picture, and that's okay to do in a picture. This is the most recognizable part of the Union buildings, so I'm just doing that and leaving the edges, just letting them shade out. Right, so we're going to be starting in the middle of our picture and working our way out on both sides. So we're first going to start with our arched part. So round about the middle of my picture, I'm just drawing a nice straight line, and I'm drawing a line at an angle coming out down to our line. Okay, try and make these two lines as similar as possible. So from here, we can see that there's two squares or two rectangular shapes. So I'm going to draw those two rectangular shapes. Then from them, we can draw our curved line for that center of the building. Okay, again, try and keep your two shapes as similar as possible. So same height, same width. So this is where, if you were really good, you would use your ruler. Or if you're happy to have a more artistic looking drawing, you can just use your pencil and your eye to figure it out. Now we're going to join these two blocks together, and you need to dip down a little bit in the middle. So what I'm going to do is just make a marker for myself, and I'm going to go down to that line on that side, down to the line on that side. So at the top of each of your rectangles, you're going to draw a line that's angled out. This is going to be the roof. And now we can join the two roofs together as well. Try and keep it as similar as possible to the line that you've just drawn. So the first curved line. I'm going to add a little bit more of a curve to mine. Right, and then there's two little chimneys there. Just drawing rectangular shapes. That's what's so great about doing a building. It's lots of rectangles and squares and recognizable shapes, so it's really easy. It's not that intimidating. On top of each of these edges here, we're going to start drawing our towers. Now the towers start as a rectangle, so we're going to make a rectangle on top of each of those. They should be a little bit higher than the two chimneys that you've just drawn. Then we're going to make a slightly smaller rectangle on top of that one. Now I'm going to make a slightly taller rectangle. This is going to be the same width as my first one. I find that it's easier to keep your building symmetrical if you do 1, 1, 1, 1. If I just drew this whole tower, then tried to draw that whole tower, I'm not as likely to keep it the same. So that's one of my tricks for making it look as similar as possible. Okay, I'm going to draw some lines on here. That's just for some pillars that are in there. Okay, we're going to have a little dome on the top. And the dome has got a spire. Because I'm going to color this in with pencil crayon, I'm not adding too many unnecessary details or shading with my pencil, because your pencil can sometimes make your pencil crayon coloring look a little bit dirty. So we're just drawing the things that we need to draw. But inside this arch here, we've got sets of columns, so there's two columns that are close to each other. It doesn't necessarily matter if you don't draw as many as there are on this picture. So I've drawn 7 sets of them here. But if you don't fit in as many sets, it's fine, as long as you have this look of 2 that are close together, a nice space, 2 that are close together, a nice space. So you just give the people the idea of the building. I like to start in the middle. So I'm drawing my 2 columns that are close together in the middle. And then I'm going to start on each side. Just be careful you don't lose track of the columns that you've done. Sometimes it gets a bit confusing when there's lots of lines. Right, inside these first two rectangles that we drew, we're going to draw a nice big window, and that's just going to be a long skinny rectangle. And then you can add a little window sill to the bottom of that. Right, now we're going to draw these two buildings that are coming out on each side, and they're going to come down to that center line that we drew in the beginning. What I found easier is we've already drawn this curved line going down. So from here, we're going to draw our rectangle, and the rectangle should be as high as this rectangle here. So I'm just going to pull my pencil out and make a mark there. Pull my pencil out and make a mark there. So I know how high my rectangle needs to be. If you wanted to use your ruler, you could do that too. Okay, try and keep these again the same size. You're just going to join those two together. You might find that the lines go up, and that's a perspective thing. So things get bigger as they get closer to us. So this part of the building is far away from us, it's smaller. And then because this part is closer to us, it looks bigger. If you went up to the buildings in real life, this would all be the same height. It's just that it's different perspectives. Okay, we're going to do 3 windows on each of these inside walls. And you're just going to lightly draw a line there to help us draw these windows. So the bottom line should be parallel to the bottom of your building, and the top line should be parallel to the top of your building. And this is going to help us get the right size for our windows. So I'm just going to draw lines going down. If you can only fit 2 in, like here, I've made it a bit big and I can only fit 2 in, that's fine, just leave it as 2. So don't try and squeeze 3 in. Right, and where this bottom line ends, I just want you to draw a line across the front of your rectangle on each side. Okay, and that's going to be for the bottom of the columns. The columns are going to go from the roof down, and there's about 4 or 5 of them. Again, it doesn't matter whether you draw 4 or 5, just make sure if you draw 4 on that side, you draw 4 on the other side. And this building is very symmetrical. Right, so we're going to draw the roof now, so that's just going to be a triangular shape. And we're going to make it as high as this rectangle on our tower. So I'm just going to bring a line across and make a mark there. That's how high I want my triangle to be. Do the same on the other side. Okay, and then we're going to join it to the roof of the inside of the building. So again, it's going to be one of these lines that's angled upwards. Okay, if you can see the line that you use to help you, just erase it. Right, there's also a chimney on each of these buildings. So again, it's just a little rectangle across the top. Try and make it in a similar spot on the other side. Right, and then from here, we're just going to shade the building out. So we're just going to draw 3 lines, and we'll let that fade off. So we'll shade it out. Okay, the bottom of this building has got some arched windows, and there's 3 of them. So whenever you've got 3 of something, it always works to draw 1 in the center, and then you just draw 1 on each side. It helps you to get them spaced out nicely. Right, what we're going to do next is the staircase in front of the building. So there's actually a beautiful park in front of the Union buildings, and these stairs will take you down to them. And we can't see it from this angle, but there's a road here, so people can drive up here and get out and go on into the buildings, but we can't see it from this angle. Right, what we're going to do is just make a little mark where these rectangles start here. And that's going to help us with our staircase. So there's going to be railing here, in this section. And when you shade it in, we're just going to shade it in with lots of little lines so it looks like the railing. And then from there, it's going to come down at an angle. Then we're on our next layer of stairs. Now these stairs come in from the edges of the building. So from the edges of the building, you're going to draw an angle coming down, and then we're going to make it straight again. Again, you could use your ruler for this part if you wanted to. When this reaches the 2 staircases that we've drawn down, then it can come down into the middle. Right, and then we've got 5 arches. Again, similar when you've got 3 or 5, it always helps to start with 1 in the middle and then you can space them out evenly. So kind of find the middle of your page, draw an arch there. Then you know you've got space for 2 on either side of it, and width if you can. Then we'll add more details to that with our pencil crayon just now. And then, as I said, there's a park down here, so we're just going to draw some squiggly lines. We'll have some bush on each side over here, just to try and make it look nice and symmetrical again. So we've got our pencil outline for our picture. We can get started with our colouring in now. So we're going to start our shading with our darkest colour. So if you look and you've got some reds and browns and oranges, you're going to use those colours. So whichever is your darkest colour, start with that, and we're just going to the joins of the roof, doing a bit of dark colouring there, and then pressing lighter and lighter as we move away from the line. Now, when you press lightly, you leave room for other colours to join in. If you press really hard, then there's not room for another colour. Now, the roof is red, so if we're using brown here, we don't want to use tons of brown and then we end up with a brown roof at the end. We want it to be a red roof, and we just want it to have some darker shading. Okay, so don't go crazy with your brown. If you have a dark brown and a light brown, you should rather use your light brown for this colouring. Okay, what I'm going to do now is pick a red, and where I did some brown colouring, I'm just going to go over it lightly with the red. Now this red's quite pinky, and actually the roof is more of an orange red. So I'm just doing a little bit of light shading with this. I'm going to leave some space for the other red that has more orange colour. If you only have a red like this, then you're just going to have to use some orange in it. Okay, but when you do pencil crayon colouring, it's all about layering the colours to get the perfect colour that you want. Turning the page so that my hand is really comfortable. Another thing that I'm doing is I'm pressing on a few pieces of paper. If you just press straight onto a desk, especially when you do light colouring like this, all of the bumps and unevenness of the desk is going to come through onto your picture. So you need to make sure that you're pressing on something nice and smooth, and that will keep your colouring smoother. Okay, I've got another red now that's a bit more of an orangey colour, so I'm going to add that in. As you can see, especially the centre of this arch, I've left quite a lot of white there because that's going to be the lightest part of my roof, as well as the insides of these triangles and towards the outside of these outer buildings. So don't just colour over the whole section. We are working from these joins, slowly making our colouring lighter and lighter. Okay, and now I'm going to go with my orange onto the centre part. Because the orange is one of the lighter colours I'm using, I'm pressing a lot harder with this orange than I was with the reds and the brown, and it will kind of help tie all of the colours together. When you press hard, you colour over all those little white spots that you've left so far and fill them with the orange. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is just take my brown again, really highlight those dark spots, so I'm pressing a lot harder now. Right, what we'll do at the end is finish off that with some black and dark brown. But for now we're going to leave the roof at that. If you need to pause the video while you finish the roof, you can. Right, the building is actually made of sandstone that they dug up from the hill where the building was built. So it's in the highest point of Pretoria, and they mined all the sandstone off the hill and used that to build the actual building. And sandstone is kind of like a yellowy, browny colour. So to get that, we're going to use our yellows and browns, a little bit of orange and black. And we're going to again layer all these colours together to try and get the different tones. So what we're going to start with is the centre part of the building. And we know it's got all these little double columns. So what we're going to start off by doing is making the background of those columns darker. Just taking my black pencil crayon, and I'm going into the sections that we don't want to colour in. And I'm just going to make it a bit darker at the top and the bottom, and lighter as it gets into the middle. Right, what I'm going to do now is take my brown, and I'm going to go over this black colouring, blend it a little bit, and again I'm going to still leave some light colouring in the centre, so it's darker at the ceiling and the floor, and a bit lighter in the middle. Right, and then you can just use one of your yellows, or if you have like a gold kind of a colour, that also works, and just do some really dark colouring over the background here. And what it should do is tie the brown and the black together. For each of the columns, we can just use a little bit of orange. So I'm going to make the left-hand side a little bit darker. So the left-hand side of each of my columns is going to be just a line of orange. If you've drawn them quite small, like I have, this is a bit tricky. Okay, and then you can take your yellow and make the right-hand side of each of the columns a bit of yellow. Just makes it look more three-dimensional if you have a light side and a dark side. Okay, now what I'm going to do is take some of my brown and just tie all of this together. So I've got lots of little bits of white sticking out here. And actually the roof is going to make a shadow on the top of the columns. So I'm taking my brown and I'm just colouring over this little section here and doing a little bit of light colouring over everything, over the columns. Yeah, and we're going to do it at the bottom too, just to neaten up all these little ends that we've got here. Right, we can move on to the two rectangles on each side of the arch now. So they've got quite a dark window, and they're also going to have a little bit of shadow in each of the corners. So I'm going to make the outside and the bottom a bit darker. So I've done quite a dark line with the same brown, and now I'm getting a bit lighter. There'll be a little bit of dark shading from the roof. Again, the outside edge is darker because of this building next to it. Do some dark shading on the bottom and a little bit of dark shading underneath the roof. Okay, and then you can take your yellows. If you have a couple of different types of yellow, that helps just layer the different colors. So I'm just doing some light shading with this yellow and add a little bit of orange to it. What we do want to do is make sure that this rectangle is lighter than the arch shading. So we want it to look different so that it's clear that they are different parts of the building. If you just color it in all the same, it's not going to look different at all. Okay, I've got a nice gold kind of a color, so I'm going to go over with that color too. I'm going to color in my windowsill with that color. Right, and then for my window, I'm going to make it mostly black, but I'm also going to put a little bit of brown shading in it. I found if you just color something in black, it looks a bit dull and dead. It makes it look a bit more alive if there's more than one color. So just adding a little bit of brown to my black makes it a bit more interesting. Right, let's go on to our two towers now. So this same brown that I used to color over the windows, I'm just going to again go around the edges of this tower. There's a little window there, so I'm just going to color that in the dark. I'm going to do a little bit of the light brown coloring. Take a yellow, take an orange. Right, if you want to take your dark brown, right, again, this is pretty similar, just outlining it with the brown and then going again with the yellow and the orange and a little bit of brown. Right, for the chimneys, we're just going to color them in lightly with orange and do a little bit of brown around the edges of them. Right, now we're going to move on out. So we're starting from the center of the building and just slowly making our way out. So you can either take some dark brown or black. I think I'm going to stick with dark brown. And it's going to be quite dark shading from this corner and just get lighter as it goes out. You can see I'm coloring over the windows because they're going to be very dark anyway. Okay, there's also going to be a bit of dark shading along the bottom, lighter as it gets up. As I'm going with my gold kind of a color now. If you don't have gold, you could just use your yellow, your orange. Okay, I'm using my black to color in the windows now. Okay, I'm also going to use it to make a bit of a shadow from where the roof comes and just add a bit of black onto the other parts of the shadow. Now for the columns, we're going to make these quite light, so use one of your lighter yellows. I'm just doing a bit of light colouring with this yellow on each of the columns. Try and make everything at least 2 colours, so I'm going to now go over it with my goldy colour, and I'm just making the outside edge a little bit darker. Okay, so we want to have a bit of contrast, so the background of these arches is going to be quite dark. You can take a little bit of black and dark brown maybe. So I'm starting with black, darker on the inside edge, lighter as it goes out. And then you can take some of your brown, using a bit of dark brown, and I'm going to use a little bit of light brown too. So what can be tricky when a building is all just kind of browns is showing the different parts of the building. You don't want it to just look like one big brown blob. You need to be really careful. Okay, I'm pressing quite hard with this light brown to help the black and the dark brown all meld together. Okay, what we need to do now too is just draw a line across. It's creating a shadow from under the window over the columns. Tying that together, and then we're also going to do a bit of shading along the bottom here. You can also use a little bit of black because you've used black in the background. Right, underneath our columns we're going to do the 3 arches. So start with a nice dark brown, and again just go on the inside and along the top with a darker shading, and then let it get lighter. Just colouring over the arches because we're going to make them black anyway. Okay, I'm going to use my gold now. If you don't have your gold kind of colour, you can use a yellow. Okay, and I'm just going to finish it off with a bit of yellow, pressing really hard to tie the colours together. And then take my black and just do each of these arches. Because we have just coloured over the arches already, there's a few colours there, so it's not just plain black. Okay, for these 2 buildings on the edge, we just kind of want them to fade into the background. So start with the dark brown, a bit of a dark line, and let it get lighter and lighter and lighter. On this end, I'm doing a nice dark line, slowly letting the line get lighter and lighter. So I'm just pressing lighter, making my lines further apart. Right, then go with a lighter brown. You can change directions if you want to. So did a bit of dark shading underneath the roof. Let things get lighter and lighter. And you could finish off with some yellow too. What we're going to do now is do this little courtyard area. So again, just dark underneath the building, getting lighter. Press really hard. So the key to this is to press really hard where the walls join together, where there's a join or a corner, and then get lighter as you get into the flatter surfaces. And that just emphasizes those corners, shows the different parts of the building. Just do some light colouring, just so that we get different colours. We don't want it to all be the same colour, the whole building. So add a bit of the orange, and I'm going to finish off with a yellowy orange colour. Pressing really hard, tying those colours together. Right, for the staircase, you can go with one of your browns. We're just going to outline the stairs and do lots of vertical lines for the railing. Just do a couple of lines in between each of these. It's just creating a light and dark shading for the balustrade. Just want it to look like a different texture to the background. Right, now you're going to take a dark brown, and we're just going to do some dark shading along this line here. Okay, and then from each line of the balustrade. This is a sandstone wall, so it's just lots of rock type bricks. So it's quite a rough texture. So when you're colouring in, you can let the colouring be a little bit rough to show this texture. Right, so I'm just doing some, it's called scribbling. We just want it to look a little bit different to the walls of the building so that people can see that they're different. Okay, I'm going to take one of my more yellow colours or orangey colours. I'm also going to do some lines going across. And I'm going to use my lightest brown to just try and tie these colours together a little bit. Colouring over the railing too. Right, then I'm going to use my black to colour in the arches. I'm going to do the left-hand side of the arch. Leave a little space to put in a light brown on the right-hand side. Okay, again a nice line here just to tie it all together. Just let the shading get lighter as you come away. Now around each of these arches there's a little bit of stonework. So you can just take one of your brown and outline for each of the arches, and then you can just do lines coming off it. Go with your lighter brown. Okay. And then we're just going to do a bit of foliage here. So for that, I'm going to use a dark green and a light green. So I'll start with my dark. And again, we're going to use the scribbling technique because it looks like a bush from far away. And I'm just scribbling, but leaving quite a bit of white in between. Leaving white space in between it so that there's space for my light green to join in. That's a nice, simple way to make some bushes look quite realistic. I'm going to do the bushes on the other side, dark green first. So the green in the bushes makes the red of the roof really stand out because green and red are complementary colours. And we've used a lot of orange in the building. So if we make a nice blue sky, the orange and the blue are going to look really good together too. They're also complementary colours. So you create contrast in your picture or difference by using colours and different textures, which is what we've tried to do here. Right, so to do my sky, I'm using a dark blue and a light blue. If you just have one blue, you're just going to press hard and slowly press lighter as you get away from the building. But if you have two colours, well, you'll do the same, but you can just add an extra colour to it. So a nice dark colouring right against the outside edge of the building. So it's almost like it's outlining the building. And then lighter colouring as we get further away. We want this colouring just to be nice and smooth and kind of fade into the background. So some people like to rub the pencil crayon with their finger or some tissue paper just to help it blend in and get really smooth. You could do that if you wanted. Right, what I'm doing now is just taking my light blue and colouring over the dark blue. And you can just slowly shade it off into the white. It's almost like we've made a frame of white around our picture. If you feel like parts of your building are not standing out as nicely as you would like them to, you could take your dark brown or your black and just go over each of the corners or lines on the walls of your building and on the roof, just to help them stand out a little bit more. Right, and there you have a pencil crayon drawing of the Union buildings. If you enjoyed this video and learned a ton from it, please subscribe to my channel. We put up new videos every week.